The early morning sun cast long shadows of the rocks, the yellow-green moss reacting to these first rays, turning from their nightly grey to the rich yellow for which Booties had come to know it. She sat atop the rock they had slept on, taking in the sunrise. It was the only thing on this planet that reminded her of home. Parker was stirring now, his arm still stiff from an injury he got at the edge of the jungle. Booties stood and surveyed the ground for a moment before leaping off, spear in hand. By the time Parker awoke fully, she was out of sight. But he wasn't worried. This was the same every morning. She always came back with something to eat. The rock wasn't exactly comfortable, nor were any of the places they had stayed since arriving on Oats. But it was safe. The scrubland predators could not climb, keeping them from eating him. Parker was an animal behaviouralist, so he spent the morning making notes on animals they had seen. Going through yesterday's visual record, he was able to spot a creature this time that he had missed when he recorded the day. Booties returned to the rock, climbing its rough north facing. Her spear sparkled with the blood of breakfast, a furry creature that had been the bulk of the prey in this region. Once cooked, they had a gamey, grey meat. It wasn't bad, but the meat didn't keep well, so it would all have to be cooked up. Last night's fire had burned out, but plenty of scavenged wood remained, so Booties built another and expertly restarted the flame. It would take an hour to cook up the food, during which Booties scanned the southern horizon, looking for any sign of debris. They'd been travelling for weeks now, so they should reach it soon. She was anxious to get there, see if anything remained. "How much further do you think it is?" Parker was chewing on a piece of meat, and he had spoken across the digital network. Booties examined the horizon for a moment. "I think it's going to be another few days, maybe a week. We are close." She turned and joined Parker for breakfast. After food, Booties gathered the rest of the meat and wood, wrapping it up and slinging it over her back, ready to travel onward. The day drifted slowly by, the wet moss and thorny weeds making progress slow. They walked through the day, snacking on cooked meats during the journey, so they would not have to stop until night. The rarity of wood on the scrubland made it necessary for Booties and Parker to gather any they saw, slowly increasing their burden until the sun began to touch the ground. There were few tall rocks now, replaced by many smaller ones, so they had to start looking for a campsite before dark. After nearly an hour, and the sun almost fully set, Booties found a hole, an old burrow for the prey they had been hunting. It was too narrow for either of them to enter, but Booties began to dig quickly, expanding the passage just large enough to squeeze through. The last light of the sun gone, they could hear the characteristic calls of the predators. When Booties reached the nesting chamber, large enough for them to huddle together, but no room for a fire, Booties shoved the bundles of wood into the passage, creating a barrier of sorts, enough that they should be safe for the night. Parker hadn't slept so close to a woman in years, even before the colony reached Beta Hydri, not since he was dumped by his last girlfriend. The close quarters of the burrow were such that he could not help but snuggle, too little space for their own area, making it his best night's sleep since the colony was destroyed. Booties awoke to the sound of thunder rolling over the landscape. The faint sound of rain followed it. If the rain gets heavier, they could drown, but the faint grey light coming down the tunnel suggested the sun had risen, so she began moving the sticks. As soon as the path was clear, she crawled to the surface. The storm was coming down from the jungle, sweeping south, too fast for them to outrun.
"Parker, you awake?"
It took a few moments for his response. Yes, I'm awake. She could hear him yawning, or the Oats lemur's version of one anyway. A storm is coming in. We have to hold up, let it pass. She began looking at the rocks in the area. They would need to shelter the entrance and dig out more space. Booties didn't wait for Parker, gathering stones as fast as possible. Once he arrived, Parker assisted with the work. It took 2 hours to gather enough stones that Booties could start building. By noon, the rain was heavy, their soaked fur and shivering forms working to finish the stone shelter. Booties was laying moss over the top to keep the rain out, so Parker retreated inside, crawling back down to the burrow below. Once the last of the moss was in place, Booties began to dig, ignoring the cold and wind. She worked to widen the tunnel more, while Parker tied sticks to make a door. It was late afternoon when the tunnel was widened, and the door was in place. Both of them exhausted, dirty, cold, and most of all, hungry. The last of yesterday's catch was eaten in the dark burrow before Booties went back to work, digging out a space near the tunnel. After another hour, it was done, and Booties began building a fire. By nightfall, it was warm in the little home. I will need to hunt tomorrow. We need to dig out some more room so we have space for storage. Booties was building up stones in front of the fire as she spoke. I will, but we also need wood for the fire. I'll see what I can find, but it's all going to be wet. It'll dry. With a nod, Booties settled down for the night, and beginning to enjoy their little home together, Parker soon snuggled down with her. The sound of the wind and rain greeted Booties as she woke. The storm was here. As she gathered her things, Parker awoke, rubbing his eyes and sliding into a sitting position. Sounds pretty bad out there. You sure you'll be safe? We don't have any food or wood for the fire. No choice. Booties turned and crawled up to the door, the storm battering the tied sticks fiercely. Wind rushed down the tunnel, chilling Parker to the bone. Parker, there is a branch near the entrance. You have to get wood for the fire. I'll be back as soon as I can. With that, she dropped down low and headed off. Climbing to the door and looking out into the storm, he could see the branch. It must have been blown in during the night, and it was 10 times his size. He could never get it all inside. Climbing out of the den and making his way to the branch was tough. He was shivering within moments, his sodden fur stuck to his skin. Using a sharp stone, Parker worked at the branch, chopping a few chunks off and taking them back in. He was not as skilled as Booties when it came to making fire, taking twice as long, and the wood being so wet, produced copious smoke. Quickly putting the rest of the wood close to the wall, he returned to the storm and continued gathering. By noon, he was exhausted and hungry, but the firewood was dry now, so smoke was at a minimum. He sat by it to dry off and warm up. It had been hours since Booties left. She had never left him for so long. He was getting worried, but what could he do? If he went out there, he would get lost. After an hour of considering, Parker climbed back to the surface. Sitting in the entrance, he began to transmit, starting a playlist of Venusian rock opera that he had, hoping it would help Booties find their way home. Every hour, he fed the fire and collected more wood to dry, always transmitting the music as a beacon. By nightfall, he was very concerned, for the storm had eased somewhat, so he carried a burning chunk of wood to the surface, placing it atop the largest rock and surrounding it with some stones, mainly to reduce the wind's effect on the flames. After that, he began cutting more of the sodden branch. He had 2 fires to feed now. Working through the hunger was helping a little, but he frequently needed to take shelter to warm and dry himself. It was the third such trip when he dozed off. Parker awoke with a start, the cold wind blowing down the tunnel. He shivered. It took a few moments to realise the door must be open, so he began crawling up. The wind was not so bad, but he could hear the driving rain. Under it all was the sound of movement. As he reached the stone hut, he could see Booties at the doorway. She was wearing a fur, one of the scrubland predators. She also had a sled of sticks and a stack of meat and berries tied to it. "Give me a hand, Parker!" She was unpacking the food, so he began to carry it down to their burrow. Soon the supplies were stored and the sled dismantled, its sticks put to dry by the fire, now burning brightly once more. Once the fire was burning and meat cooking, they sat and snacked on berries. "You didn't dig out more space." Parker let out the lemur equivalent of a laugh, more like a hoot. "Sorry, I must have forgot with all the worrying and hunger." "I saw the crash site," Booties calmly replied. "You did? How far is it?" "There is a ridge to the southeast. It's maybe 3 or 4 days' walk from there. It's a lot of debris, stretches for miles." With that, she shared an image of it. Chunks of colony stretching off to the horizon, decimated forest in its wake. "As soon as the storm leaves, we need to get moving." She turned to cooking meat. "How long do you think?" "Plenty enough time for you to dig us more room. Maybe 3 days?" "It'd be a shame to leave this place. We put a lot of work into it." Handing him a piece of cooked meat, Booties smiled.
"I think it's easier to survive here than in the jungle. The predators are smaller, and there is plenty of stone for homes."
"If we find a transmitter, we can call the others. Have them come here."
"I'm hoping we find a vehicle so we can go pick them up."
After dinner, Booties began to clean and scrape the hide. But Parker was tired, quickly settling down with a full belly in a warm home. That was it. This place was feeling like home.